Ever wonder why some people rise up into leadership roles super quickly while other people work hard for months or even years and still don't get promoted? It's because you don't get promoted by working hard. You get promoted by knowing how to be strategic and play the corporate game. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you how to do that in a way that is fully aligned with your deeper values. If you are ready to claim your seat at the leadership table, then let's dive in. Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's episode was inspired by a pattern that I see pretty often when my clients first come to me and when I begin working with them. And that pattern is stagnation. It can be really frustrating to feel like you are working super hard, giving everything you have to your job, but you're still not getting the recognition and the rewards that you deserve. This is a very common thing, and I know how frustrating it can be when you're stuck in the same level for many years and you haven't progressed to that next leadership title, but it does happen pretty frequently. And if you are experiencing it, it's not because something is wrong with you or because you don't have what it takes to rise up into a bigger leadership role. What I see more often than not when I'm supporting my clients is that you're stuck because you haven't yet developed some of those beneath the surface skills that you need in order to develop a strong reputation as a leader and be offered a promotion within your organization. That's why I wanted to record today's episode. Today, you're going to be learning one of my most important frameworks for advancing as a leader. It is called the rule seeker versus rule maker framework. I'm going to teach you about that framework, and through learning it in today's episode, you are going to leave with a crystal clear understanding of why some people get promoted quickly while other people work hard and stay stuck. And most importantly, you are going to have a roadmap for the mindset shifts and behavior shifts that will set you up for rapid growth and landing promotions within your organization. I am so excited because the mission behind my work is to help women rise up into leadership positions. So let's get into it, and I hope you enjoy. The main idea that I'm going to be teaching in today's episode is that if you want to get promoted and you want people to see you as a leader, you want to make sure to pivot from being a rule seeker to a rule maker. Don't worry, I'm going to explain to you what both of those things are. And throughout this episode, you're actually going to self-diagnose to figure out, am I a rule seeker or a rule maker? And I'm also going to teach you how to pivot from rule seeker to rule maker, because this is ultimately what's going to position you as a leader. So let's start with the definition of a rule seeker. A rule seeker is someone who seeks and follows rules. Now, when I use the word rule, a lot of different things can function as rules. So, for example, a deadline is a rule, right? It's like you need to do this thing by this date. That's a rule. Rule seekers operate really well against deadlines, and they want to know what the deadlines are, and they want to make sure to hit them. Other examples of rules are things like how a project is executed within an organization. Maybe your company has specific steps or a specific process that you're expected to adhere to. Another example of rules is what are the implicit quote-unquote rules about which stakeholders should be included in which types of projects. Now, rule seekers really like to find these rules and follow them, and they feel a sense of comfort when they know what the rules are and they're able to adhere to those rules. Something that's really interesting is that listening to this podcast is a rule-seeking behavior. Many people come to my podcast because they're wondering, what are the rules of using my voice? What are the rules of playing this corporate game? They're searching for rules and using some of the learnings that I share here to help them conceptualize and follow those rules. So if you're listening to this podcast, there's a good chance that in some ways you're a rule seeker. Now, the wonderful thing about rule seekers is that they possess a lot of very interesting strengths. So rule seekers tend to be very consistent. You can rely on them to get things done and do what they say they're going to do. They are not going to miss their deadlines. They're going to get it over the finish line. They also tend to be very thorough. They're not going to cut corners. When they do something, they're going to do it right. Again, that goes with that tendency of, okay, I want to know what the rules are and I want to follow them. I don't want to skip any steps or skip any rules. They tend to be very good at process-oriented work. And this makes sense because a process is just a set of rules. And also, rule seekers can have incredible stamina and follow through. They can just get a lot done. They take on a lot of workload and they complete all of it. So this consistency and this ability to follow through and do this thorough job means that rule seekers are creating outputs and deliverables and lots of value. That said, there are some drawbacks to being a rule seeker, and this is super important for you to know about if you're interested in elevating into a leadership or executive role. Because some of the drawbacks of being a rule seeker can slow down your path to leadership. So there are 3 drawbacks that I want to talk through. The first one is that rule seekers, because they love searching for rules, they will always search for rules, even in situations where rules don't exist. So there are some things that you do in your job where there are clear rules, and rule seekers thrive in those kinds of situations. But there are also elements of your job where there aren't any rules. So some examples of situations where there aren't any rules are there aren't any rules around who should be speaking up in a room, around how proactive you're allowed to be when it comes to reaching out and developing relationships with more senior level stakeholders. There aren't any rules about how often you're allowed to set direction or challenge an idea that's coming from above you in the organization. So there are these looser gray area elements of a typical corporate job, and these loose gray area activities don't have rules. Now, the problem is, if there are certain elements of your job that don't have rules, you could get stuck in inaction because you're searching for rules that don't exist. Your mind is trying to answer these questions of like, should I speak up? Should I reach out to this person? Should I let everyone know that I think there's a better way? Your mind is searching for the rules of whether you should do those things and how you should do those things. And because you're not finding those rules, you're not finding those answers, you don't take those actions as frequently. Now, here's what's so important about this. Typically, the actions that don't have rules, those messier, more ambiguous actions, those are the ones that help you get noticed as a leader. So it's actions like speaking up in a room when you're not the most senior person, being proactive about building relationships, being proactive about setting vision and sharing bigger ideas. Those are the types of actions that help people see you as a leader and help you get promoted in an organization. So what's tricky about being a rule seeker is that while your tendency to seek out and follow rules helps you be very productive and diligent and reliable, that same tendency to seek out and follow rules can get in the way of you speeding up your path to leadership because you will be taking fewer of those bigger, bolder leadership actions that really help people notice you and take you seriously as a leader. So that is the first drawback of being a rule seeker. And by the way, before I go deeper into this, if you are identifying as being a rule seeker, I want you to listen to me share these drawbacks without judging yourself, because there's nothing wrong or bad about being a rule seeker. In fact, being a rule seeker is what helps you create success in the beginning of your career. So I don't want you to think about this as right and wrong. I want you to think about it as the way that you operate has to evolve as your leadership position evolves. So with that being said, let's talk about the second drawback of being a rule seeker, which is that it's difficult to stand out. So one of the things that you have to do in order to speed up your path to leadership in your company is you have to be known for something. You have to distinguish yourself. You have to have a reputation where people know what makes you different, what makes you special, what makes you unique. The way that I think about it is I like to imagine executives having water cooler conversations or just like casual hallway conversations. And what I think about is when executives are having these more informal chats with one another, they're often going to be talking about people on the team or people at the company, and they're going to be commenting on the quality of those people's leadership and of those people's work. And I like to ask myself the question of what do I want these executives to be saying about me when they're at the water cooler and one of them says, hey, like, did you see that piece of work that Jessica was working on? Like, what do you think of it? Now, obviously, I'm not in the corporate world anymore. I'm a full-time coach, but when I was in the corporate world, that's something that I thought about. Now, when they're having that water cooler conversation, in order for you to develop a reputation that helps you stand out and get promoted, those executives need something meaty to talk about when it comes to their impression of you. And it's very challenging for them to have remarkable, wonderful things to say about someone who is a rule seeker. I really want you to imagine this because imagining this is the best way to understand this. I want you to imagine someone named Sarah who is a rule seeker. Sarah looks for the rules, follows the rules, hits her deadlines, follows processes, but she never goes outside of those bounds. So I want you to imagine two executives chatting by the water cooler, and one of them says like, hey, have you worked with Sarah? Like, tell me about her. What's her reputation? And the other one says like, oh, she always follows rules. She always hits deadlines. Like if you give her a process, she will follow that process. If that's the conversation that the executives are having about Sarah, do you think Sarah is likely to stand out and get promoted? The answer is probably no, because it's really hard to be seen as remarkable or to be seen as a really strong leader when the main thing that people are saying about you is that you follow rules and follow processes. So that is the second drawback of being a rule seeker. The final drawback, and this one is so loaded and it can make you feel really frustrated and justifiably so. The third drawback is that companies are incentivized to keep rule seekers in middle management positions. This is because rule seekers tend to be good at generating a high volume of output. An employee who generates a high volume of deliverables is more valuable to a company when they're in a position that relies heavily on execution. And typically, the higher you go and the bigger leadership title you have, the less execution you're doing. Whereas as you look downwards on an org chart at middle management and below, the more execution you're doing. So if you think about it from the perspective of a company, if they look at someone like Sarah, who pumps out a lot of deliverables, they're going to ask themselves, okay, where in the organization do we need someone pumping out a lot of deliverables? So their incentives become skewed, and their incentives could start to go against Sarah's incentives. Sarah might want to get promoted because that's what she desires for her career and her professional growth. But the company doesn't want Sarah to get promoted because they benefit more by keeping her in middle management. I have seen this play out multiple times, and it can lead to a lot of frustration Now, in some ways, even though this can be frustrating, it's actually good news because what it means is that the path to leadership does not involve working more. In many ways, it involves working less. And that brings me to the second part of this episode where I'm going to talk about transitioning from rule seeker to rule maker. So we're going to take a quick break. And then after the break, I'm going to tell you what a rule maker is, how to know if you are one, why rule makers get promoted into leadership positions faster, and most importantly, I'm going to explain to you how to transition from rule seeker to rule maker. So let's take a quick break, and then I'll catch you on the other side of the break. Do you want to develop a reputation as a super effective leader? If so, you have to demonstrate something called bias to action. Bias to action means that you are someone who is always taking action. Whether you're leading a meeting, beginning a new project, or solving a problem, you are laser focused on keeping things moving forward and taking that next step to build momentum. Companies love promoting employees who demonstrate bias to action because they make truly excellent leaders. I want to help you learn to demonstrate bias to action. So I created a free worksheet to help guide you. This worksheet is beginner friendly, and in it, I guide you in learning how you can demonstrate bias to action when running your next meeting. If you are ready to make a solid impression on your boss, your coworkers, and all of the leaders at your company, grab this worksheet now by clicking the link at the top of the show notes or by going to jessguzikcoaching.com/bias to action, all one word. Once again, you will find the link to this free worksheet in the show notes. And now, back to the episode. Okay, so this is the fun part of the episode because we're going to talk about what a rule maker is and how you can pivot from rule seeker to rule maker. So a rule maker is someone whose bias is to create the rules themselves. So unlike rule seekers who are searching for pre-existing rules that they can follow, rule makers are asking themselves, what do I think the rules should be? And after they answer that question, they take action based on their leadership and their own thoughts around what the rules, quote unquote, should be. Now, there are two umbrella scenarios where rule makers really thrive. The first is situations where there are no rules at all, but they also thrive in situations where the existing rules are suboptimal. A rule seeker is more likely to follow rules even if those rules are suboptimal, whereas a rule maker is more likely to question those rules and be like, why are we doing it this way? This doesn't make sense. I think that we should do this differently. Now, you're probably already starting to figure out why rule makers are very likely to get promoted into leadership positions, and I'll share a few quick thoughts with you on that. Number one, the higher you get in an organization, the fewer rules there are, the more ambiguity there is. So the higher the position, the more an organization needs someone in that position who is not just comfortable with ambiguity, but who thrives in ambiguity. Similarly, as you go into higher and higher positions, there's higher levels of complexity. And when the complexity of the work that you're doing increases, it becomes impossible for everything to be bound by rules. So those are a couple of reasons why rule makers make great leaders. And if we go back to the water cooler example that I shared with you, where I told you to imagine executives talking about employees at the water cooler, and we talked about this idea of if you're a rule seeker, it's hard for executives to have glowing things to say about you. The opposite is true for rule makers. Rule makers tend to really stand out in the minds of executives. And if you imagine two executives chatting at the water cooler, let's say they're chatting about Rachel, who is a rule maker, instead of them saying things like, oh, she always follows processes and she always hits deadlines. They're going to say something like, I am so glad she pushed back on that because we are now taking the project in such a better direction. Or I'm so impressed with how she handled that messy client situation. Those are the conversations that they're going to have about you if you're a rule maker. And those are the conversations that give them the confidence to promote you into a bigger leadership role. And one bonus tip from this episode that is just a really useful thing to keep in mind is as you think about your future at your company and where you want to go within your company, ask yourself, what do executives need to be saying about me at the water cooler? And what actions can I take to get them to say those things? Now, here's one thing that I'll say in terms of the differences between rule seekers and rule makers. Being a rule seeker is emotionally safer because when you're following someone else's rules, you're not really taking a risk. If something in the rules isn't working out, it's not on you. Whereas being a rule maker requires so much courage because you're taking much more ownership over the process and you're also putting your thought leadership out there. So it can feel exposing and vulnerable and emotionally risky. But the thing is, the upsides of it are so worth it. As you become a rule maker, your confidence grows because you start having impact at a much bigger level. When you watch yourself have impact because you had the courage to push back, you had the courage to initiate something big, and then that results in something really good for your company, the confidence that you build from that is so much deeper than the confidence that you build from following a process and hitting a deadline. The other wonderful thing about being a rule maker, aside from the obvious benefit of moving into leadership positions faster, is that you are respected at a much deeper level. When we have rule makers in the room with us, we feel that energy. We feel the confidence they have. We feel the leadership that they're bringing. And I'm sure you've had experiences of being in a room with someone who was just like moving things forward and taking up a lot of space in the room in a way that made people defer to them and respect them. When you become a rule maker, you really start to earn that respect and people really start to turn to you for direction and for answers. And that is a great feeling. So let's talk about how to shift from rule seeker to rule maker. Now, there are a few ingredients to this, and these are the core ingredients that I help my clients develop when I'm supporting them in the Art of Speaking Up Academy. The first thing that we need to do to transition from rule seeker to rule maker is we need to build emotional resilience. It is emotionally safer to be a rule seeker, to follow the rules, and it is much scarier and more exposing to be a rule maker. Now, when we have low emotional resilience, anytime that we are faced with something that's emotionally uncomfortable, our default reaction is to avoid that thing. So we stop dead in our tracks as soon as the discomfort arises, and we backtrack and we go back to the safer thing. And a lot of times when that happens, when you try to take up space, but then it feels uncomfortable, so then you backtrack and you don't take up space, a lot of times you might think, I can't do this, I lack the confidence, something is wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you. It's just that you need to strengthen the muscle of being able to navigate a larger amount of uncertainty and emotional discomfort. The beautiful thing is, as you learn to do that, not only are you able to take some of those rule maker actions that you used to avoid, but over time, those rule maker actions start to become easier. You get used to them. They don't feel as scary. And you've probably had examples in your life or in your career where something that used to feel intense and scary and super hard doesn't feel that hard anymore because you faced it over and over and it became comfortable and familiar. So this is just like that. If you're willing to face it and you're willing to work on the muscle of tolerating that emotional discomfort, you can transition to becoming a rule maker. And one of the best side effects to building emotional resilience is that it increases your confidence exponentially. And it really does create this virtuous cycle where as you're able to do things that used to be emotionally too difficult for you, your confidence grows because you're like, wow, I did that thing. I feel so confident. And that confidence fuels you to take on more and more challenges and to do more and more rule maker behaviors. And as you do those things, your confidence grows. So it's this wonderful loop where you're taking bolder action and your confidence is growing. And both of those things not only feel amazing, but really help you grow in your career. The second important ingredient when it comes to shifting from rule seeker to rule maker is to have a feedback loop. This is super important. I've worked with a lot of rule seekers, and many of my clients tend to lean in the rule-seeking direction. And a lot of times when people have been rule seekers for a very long time, they don't even have awareness of the ways that their rule-seeking behaviors are infiltrating their day-to-day habits and actions. For example, you might not have even had awareness that you are a rule seeker until listening to this episode. And even when we start to understand that we are in this state of mind, it can be difficult to see the ways in which we are limiting ourselves because of our rule-seeking thought processes. This is why it is so useful to have an outside feedback loop, someone who is observing you, who knows your habits, and who can also help you build awareness of when you're getting stuck in rule seeking and defaulting to old behaviors. When you have that outside feedback loop and simultaneously you're growing your emotional resilience so that you have the courage and fortitude to take those bigger rule maker actions, you will gradually start shifting your habits and your behaviors, and you will begin showing up in a way that is going to get you promoted and in a way that is going to have executives saying really good things about you at the water cooler. So to summarize the main ideas in today's episode, if you are stuck in a career plateau, one thing that can get you unstuck is shifting from rule seeker to rule maker. Instead of seeking out and following rules, you want to build the muscle of making your own rules and taking action based on the rules that you create. This is what helps you distinguish yourself in an organization because rule makers give executives something meaty to talk about, and that is what forms your reputation. And your reputation is your main asset that you use to get ahead and to get promoted in an organization. And one of the best ways to shift from rule seeker to rule maker is to increase your emotional resilience and build some kind of outside feedback loop that helps you think in new ways and take new, bigger rule maker actions. If these are shifts that you want to make, and if you're realizing that you are ready to pivot from rule seeker to rule maker, this is exactly what I do with my clients in the Art of Speaking Up Academy. Inside this program, I help you build emotional resilience. I help you build confidence. I help you develop your unique voice as a leader so that your impact can extend beyond just following the rules and so that you can become known as someone who makes the rules. If you are craving deeper support, accountability, a step-by-step process to help you build deep confidence and find your voice as a leader, I want to invite you to join the waitlist for the Art of Speaking Up Academy. When you join the waitlist, number one, you get an invitation to enroll early. And number two, when you enroll early, you get exclusive early enrollment bonuses. Sometimes I offer a bonus workshop. Sometimes I offer a bonus private one-on-one session with me. When you're on the waitlist, you ensure that you will get the best possible bonuses included in your Art of Speaking Up Academy enrollment. So I recommend that you do not miss that opportunity. To add yourself to the waitlist, click the link in the show notes or go to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy. Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode was so much fun to record, and I will catch you next week. Bye.